Hello, my name is Tyler Ehring, and I am here today with Grace Abell. We're going to do a little video today talking about Grace's journey with cancer. She wanted to make this video as like an informational type video in case there are students or people in the future who are going through similar situations. So we'll get started here first with our first question for Grace, and we'll take it right back to the very beginning. Grace, when did you find out you had cancer, and how did you find out?
So it was the second semester of my freshman year. Um, I was in track, so I also got COVID and I had strep, so I was out for a bit, and I had like itching at night, like I'd be up all night doing like itching, and I had fevers that would start at like like once 5 p.m. hits, I would straight up get like 102-degree fever or something. It was really bad, and I was just so tired all the time, and I was losing weight. I had no energy. And then when I went back to track, they thought it was still side effects from COVID because I would run like half a lap and I'd get like this really bad chest pain. And so I thought it was COVID. So I went to a doctor and they did think it was like something with my heart. But then I went back, I got an EKG and they went back and they said they found this like mass. So then I went and got a CAT scan and then they found out it was cancer. So it was like, but it was weird because it was like a 2 month thing where like nobody could figure out what it was. And I just kind of didn't go to the doctor. I don't know why. But I just thought it maybe was like in my mind or something. It was like a nerves or something.
Yeah, so it sounds like for one, it was a pretty unique time in the aspect that obviously COVID was going on,
Yeah.
so we had a lot of kind of uncertainties, but it sounds like based on what you're saying, there were definitely warning signs. Your body was trying to tell you that something wasn't right.
Yeah.
It was just a little bit difficult because of the circumstance of the pandemic and everything like
Yeah.
that. So, with that said, as far as how you actually felt, did you feel weak? Did you feel tired during that time leading up to it, or what was that like?
Yeah, I remember I went to the union track meet and I it was like 1,000 degrees outside it felt like. But like I was so cold. I was under a blanket the entire time and I just slept through the entire meet. I could barely make it to school. I would sleep in most of the time, or I'd be sleeping through my classes. I also like I didn't know it at the time because I just didn't feel it. I had like a lump on my neck and I had lumps in my armpits because my swollen lymph nodes, I guess. But like I didn't even know about those like until the doctor told me it when I went to the hospital that day to get treated.
Wow, and yeah, I think that's one of those things where, obviously I haven't ever been in this situation, but when you're a high school student, that's just not even something that's on your radar. You're not really thinking about that as even a possibility. So, obviously, eventually you went to the doctor and you guys kind of figured this out. What were those moments like when you found out that you did have cancer, and what was that like mentally for you as a high schooler? And also, I believe you were a freshman. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah.
So, kind of explain what it was like to be a freshman girl in high school and getting this news.
Well, I found out when I was like at school. So I was in Mr. G's Dutch time practicing a song for our upcoming concert. And I got called out to my parents' car and they told me, and I came back to school for the rest of the day. Because, like, I guess it hadn't hit me really. Like, I remember I went to my basketball coach and I was like, I won't be at practice tomorrow. And I just told him I had cancer. I don't know why. I just didn't really know how to react or what to feel because, like, nobody to do. And then the next day, I was at school and they called my dad and told me to get to the hospital right away and to pack my stuff because I was going to be staying and starting treatment and all that and getting my port. So I straight up went to the hospital and everything started like that day. Like it was all just happened at once. It's not like you sat there and waited and they had a plan. No, you got called to the hospital. And I started. I got my port put in, a biopsy to see what kind I had. And it was also weird because it was prom. So like 24 hours after my port got put in, I went to prom. So I think at
Wow.
that moment I was just like, I don't think everything really hit. I think I was just trying to keep doing stuff because I was just trying to act like it wasn't real. I guess the reality hadn't hit. And like I was really scared. I think the scariest part was losing my hair because I had like I had hair down to my butt, and like as a high school girl, you don't really want to be bald. And I was just terrified of that.
Right. So you had a lot of stuff happening in a very short window of time, and I can understand the idea of trying to just kind of keep going on like it wasn't a thing, it wasn't really happening, but also it was so much happening at once. I'm sure it was a bit of a sensory overload, just
Yeah.
too much to even take in, really.
It's kind of like I felt like I didn't want people to think I was trying to get pity, so I acted like nothing was kind of wrong. Does that make sense? And like, there's nobody to really talk about it here at school, so like, what was I supposed to do? You can't just stop. I kind of just had to.
So, okay, here is a question for you. And, I know whenever you first approached me about this idea, it was along the lines of obviously you had an experience and you didn't really have, there was no real, you know, directions or guidelines to like follow because you didn't know how to handle the experience and not. So your whole approach initially when you talked to me about doing this was that, if there was somebody else that was in the same situation, there were some things that maybe you wished, they would know that, hey, this is okay. This is how it's okay to be this way. Things like that. But the main thing I want to ask after what you just said is, obviously you want to pretend like it wasn't a thing, and you probably didn't really know how to talk about it. Do you wish that it would have been something that you could have talked to people about, or do you think it was better just avoiding it and trying to go on with life in that aspect?
I think how I approached it was I obviously made a lot of jokes about it. I still do. But like I wish there would have been times where I could have sat down and talked to somebody about how I was feeling. Cause I remember like sitting there at night in the hospital, like all I could hear was the beeping of that thing, and I would just have like a meltdowns. Or sometimes my mom, when she told me I couldn't do something, I'd have a meltdown, and like it was all just at once because I never really sat there and I never went to a therapist or anything. I never really talked to anybody about it, and I mean there's probably lots of things that still people don't know because there's just not really anybody like where you live in a small community, and there wasn't really anybody to talk about it. In the hospital, I was at a children's, so there wasn't anybody my age there. I didn't have any it was during COVID, so nobody could come visit me besides my pastors and my family, and they could only
Wow.
visit one at a time. So that was like really hard, I think.
So not only were you going through a very unique experience, but it was also just at an incredible unique time that
Yeah.
I could see where it would be very isolating. So when you were going through that, I would assume that because you could probably be yourself and say more of what was on your mind, what you're thinking with your family. Was there things that you wish your friends, would have known, or you wish your friends or people you saw at school, would have asked you, or was there anything basically you were wishing you could get from your friends but just didn't know how to get because of the situation and its uniqueness?
Well, I think for me, most of my friends at the time kind of like it's kind of like when you get sick, people don't really want to. They'll tell you like I hope you get better, but they don't really want to hang out with you. So
Right.
I didn't hang out with a lot of people. So I think mainly the people I talked to were on my teams I played with. So I tried to get involved, stay involved, cause I don't know. I didn't really talk to anybody. Like I was at home all the time. It was just my family. But it's kind of hard to talk to your family too, because you don't really want them to know you're struggling. You don't want to scare them. I know everybody was scared because nobody knew it was gonna happen. I mean, they had a family group chat without me where they told stuff like they didn't even want me to know, because it's just like a sensitive thing. Like if I hear something, it could got me down or like
Right.
maybe made me give up, and I don't know. It was kind of hard, just
Uh,
figuring out what things to talk about and with who and when.
yeah, I would say that the idea of it being hard is an understatement. I can't even imagine going through something like that because it just wasn't my reality whenever I was in high school. But Um, the next question I'd like to ask is, what advice, if somebody in the future were to watch this video, trying to kind of seek answers because they're maybe in a similar situation, they're a high school student, and this has now become a part of their reality. Before we go on further talking about, the process and things like that, what advice would you give for that person as far as expressing themselves? Do you think do you wish you would have expressed yourself to your friends more? Do you wish you would have expressed yourself to your family more? Or do you feel like, keeping it in and joking about it was the best way for you to cope? Or do you just wish that it could have been a little bit different as far as what you really think would have made you feel better at that time?
Um, I think one thing I wish is that I would have maybe asked for more help. Like I was just so scared of asking for help and people judging me and thinking I was just looking for like using the cancer card or whatever. I made jokes like that all the time, but like really when you do use that cancer card, people honestly sometimes just get mad. They're like she's just doing that cuz she has cancer. And like that's not a bad thing. Just people look I and people look like that. They just thought I was trying to get pity, but sometimes I wish I would have just sucked it up and asked for help because sometimes I did need help. I wish I would have found a way to express myself. I do think jokes helped a lot. I think having laughter and joy in those hard times is what really got me through it. If I wouldn't have made jokes, it probably, and that's a good thing always to have. But there also needs to be times when I knew stuff was wrong and I should have asked for help instead of just ignoring it.
Well, you've been a jokester well before you had cancer,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that was something that I'm sure
yeah.
you've always kind of used in your life as well, and it was good that you continued that to help with that. But I think that's great insight on I'm sure it's really hard to ask for help, and honestly, I would think that anybody that would be watching this would agree. It's easy to agree when you're watching something like this, but um, it's never like to like say somebody's just looking for pity when they have cancer. Seems like I could see where when you're in the situation of where you have cancer, you could be worried that other people would think like that. Um, but I would hope that for humanity's sake, people would not be like that. Like if you need help, I think
Yeah.
that's great advice. Definitely don't be afraid to ask for that help.
I don't think people like think that they think pity like is a bad thing. I just think that's how humans are. Sometimes they're like, "Oh, well, I think they should earn that." I don't think it's a bad thing that people think like that. They just do. I think
Right.
it's in our human
It's like a
minds.
human nature type thing.
Yeah, it's not like anything bad though.
Okay, so one thing that I want to commend you for, and I think anybody that knows you or knew you during that time, it was interesting to me that it always felt like you had that positive, uplifting spirit when it came to that situation. How did you keep that positive spirit? And obviously, I have to imagine that there had to be times where, like you said, it wasn't positive and that you wore down in the dumps. How did you balance that with what you let your friends, your peers, your people at school, the public see, versus how you were really feeling sometimes?
So two things I think kept me positive. One was just staying involved. I still played basketball. I still went to softball stuff as much as I could. I went to church camp, and also just looking forward to the little things, like seeing, like I remember I didn't get to go to my last choir concert, but they did like a thing where they told me like they on the live stream I got to watch it and they're like we missed you or whatever. That's just looking for stuff like that. And I got to go to camp that year. I wasn't supposed to. They moved around my chemo schedule so I could. And second of all, just support. I think if I didn't have the support of my family, like my church helped me out. They always delivered food. There are people in the community that sent me little gifts. I think having small things to look forward to is how I got through it. I think if I would have just sat there and like thought of all the stuff that I couldn't do, it would have been horrible. But you have to sit there and think of the stuff that you can do.
Interesting. So one of the ways I perceived what you just said was you couldn't look at it like super large picture. You had to break it down into
Yeah.
like manageable chunks of things that, um, you know, I'm excited for this because it's happening tomorrow.
Yeah,
Not
and I think you also just have to accept the reality that it's happening. I think
right.
without accepting it, like if I every day I would have sat there and complained how much medicine I had to take or how much pain I was in, like that would have been horrible. But like I just had to accept I can do this and I can get better and it won't always be like this.
So let's segue based off what you just said. You talked about obviously you were getting receiving medical treatment a lot. You were at the hospital a lot, and you were doing things that I mean, obviously you probably didn't want to be doing. But you, how did you have? What was the mindset you had doing those things that obviously you didn't want to be doing, but you knew that you had to do for your treatment?
I really I just thought to myself, I'm really young. I have so much ahead of me. Like I thought to myself what I wanted to how why I wanted to beat this. I thought of some goals like basketball season was coming up, softball. Um, I never let myself I just like had to keep going. Like I knew if I would have sat there and gave up that I would not have gotten back up again. And if I would have quit the stuff I was doing, I probably wouldn't have gone back out to do the sports. And it's kind of hard when you look at when you cuz I lost like I think I weighed like maybe 100 pounds. So even when I was on that field, it was just really hard seeing everybody else with all those muscle and being able to run. I wasn't able to run. I would be winded after maybe running to first base or something. But it was just having to look back and see how much progress I made every day. Like I had to think to myself to be patient. I think patience is a big thing in a journey like that with yourself.
Yeah, and I can imagine watching your peers in a completely different situation would be challenging, but um, I mean, I think anybody would commend you for staying involved, and I guess that would be advice that you would give to somebody else going through a similar situation is to, even though it's hard, try to stay involved in whatever capacity you can.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Makes sense. So let's talk about. I think a lot of people, myself included, I learned so much talking to you about your journey the last time we talked about this. But let's talk a little bit about what kind of cancer you have, what kind of cancer you had, and what that meant.
Okay. So I had stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's I think it's one of the more common cancers. So they had a plan ready. Basically, I had a mass about the size of I think they said a cantaloupe in my chest, so about right here, and then I had lymph nodes in my neck that were swollen. So I got to buy, and then I got chemo to take that took care of the lymph nodes. I was supposed to get radiation to get rid of the mass, but I think we had like a big meeting because the chemo actually worked out really well for me, and they're like, we don't really want to risk like in teens you can risk breast cancer and other types of cancer. if you get radiation. So we ultimately decided not to go with that. But also, it's a blood cancer, so like I can't donate blood or anything like that in the rest of my life. Yeah.
So, how did the doctors and the people around you help educate you about what you were actually going through so you could understand it? Because another thing for anybody that's watching this, Grace is an incredibly intelligent person. She was incredibly, I had her in eighth grade math or seventh grade math, and she was incredibly, she learns very quickly. So, as far as wanting to know what was going on, did you want to know everything? Did you kind of immerse yourself in like, I want to understand this? Or was it just kind of like you were just taking what people threw at you?
So basically, going into this, all I heard was cancer, and like I was like, when you hear that, like I just thought I was gonna die. Like I had that mindset because I think cancer, I think death, and that's was really terrifying. But when I got there, I had a really good doctor and a good team at the children's hospital. My doctor sat down and explained to me everything I had. She told me I wasn't gonna die, like, and that was reassuring. And then she basically they have like packets. I have an entire folder, and in there it explains what treatment I'm gonna get, what schedule, what medicine I have to take, what I have, and like what like operations I was gonna have to get. And even like then she would ask me my opinion on what I wanted to do,
Hmm.
or if I was feeling scared or how I felt. And then she would explain every single little thing to me. I answer any question me or my parents had, and we had a lot of questions. And she was just really patient. I think that helped a lot, cause I had no idea anything going into that. I didn't even know like my cancer ribbon. People came out and were like wearing purple, and I was like, I have a cancer ribbon. Like all I think of is cancer and like the gold, and I think the pink. I didn't
Right.
know anything else about it.
Okay. So obviously, it sounds like the medical team you had, and that was at Children's in St. Louis.
Yeah, St. Louis Children's. Yeah.
So the medical team you had definitely was reassuring,
Mhm.
and they answered the questions that you had. So if you were to put yourself in a situation that you're sitting across from somebody else who's going through a similar situation, what would you tell them in regards to learning about what they're going through from their doctor's perspective and asking questions?
Like asking, like if I was a patient and asking a doctor, or if I
Yes.
was the doctor.
So, like, assume you were talking to somebody who was going through a similar situation like you were,
Okay.
and talking to them about the questions to ask and talking with their doctors.
I think a big thing to ask is probably survival rate. I think that's a big thing. Like you don't want to hear it, but that it's just
Something you need to
you
know.
need to know it. I think asking side effects. Side effects is one of the first questions I had. Because there's long term side effects, and then there was the side effects I had. Like I still have like sometimes my brain gets really confused and stuff. They call that chemo brain, which I know it sounds stupid, but like it's a real thing. Like some of my nerves kind of messed up sometimes. I just have my knees always hurt, my hips always hurt from it. But like I think asking side effects, like even that sounds silly, that's an important thing to ask. I think asking what kind of treatment you're gonna get is important because there's so many out there. I think asking.
What about building a relationship with your medical team? What was that like, and what advice would you give to somebody else as far as building that relationship?
I think my doctor, she just showed me that I could trust her, and being and telling me everything straight up and not hiding anything from me made me trust her. And she was just a super nice lady. I still talk to her all the time. When I go there, she's not an oncologist anymore, but she'll come in and say hi to me. We email each other. I think just not being afraid to ask questions helps them build a relationship, and knowing that and your doctor knowing that they'll answer those and not hiding from you is really helpful because you want to be able to trust somebody who's in charge of your life. Basically your life is in their hands. You can't really do anything. You just have to go with what
They're
their
saying.
advice. Yeah, you have to trust that they know what they're doing and that they're going to do what's best for you.
So, did you ever feel like now that I'm a parent myself, obviously, as a parent, you would never wish for your child or really anybody you know to go through something like this. But I think from my perspective as a parent, it would be really hard for me to like, say some of those things that are hard and be honest with my child about like, you're gonna feel horrible. This is what this is gonna be like. Did you feel like it was easier to talk to your doctors about the hard stuff like that, or was it easier to talk to your parents? And your parents are phenomenal people, and I know that obviously they wanted to uh, be there for you every way they could. But from your perspective, for the tough conversations, what was the easier route for you to go for?
Well, saying I was like four, I was think I was 15 when I was diagnosed, so most of the information went through my parents first, and then my dad would sit down and tell me. But if like I had a problem, yeah, I'd probably tell my dad first, just because I known him longer. I know he's gonna. He if I had a problem with what my medical team was doing, he would not he'd not flinch. He'd go tell them. He'd
Oh,
make
so he would
sure.
advocate for you in that
Yes,
situation. Okay.
I think my parents were really helpful in this. I was not afraid to tell them anything. They told me stuff which was even helpful, even if it was scary. They told me their opinions on it. They prayed with me. They were there for me every step of the way. So I think that really helped. And I mean, you also see like your team. They come in at like 8 o'clock every morning to do rounds, but like I only saw my doctor maybe once a week. They're only in on Tuesdays, so like you don't get to see them as much. So I think that makes it harder. I saw my parents every day in the hospital.
Okay, so talking about the journey of the actual medical treatment itself, obviously you said that you had to go through at least one round of chemo, right?
Um, I had like 5 rounds, I think.
Okay. So you talked about wanting to know the side effects and wanting to know
Yeah.
what that was like. So a lot of what you approached me with when we wanted to make this video was, information for somebody else going through a similar situation. So if you were to be just lay it out there, what it was like when you were going through chemo, what did you feel like? And then also, how long when you had that treatment did you have to stay in the hospital before you could even come back to school and like try to return to normalcy?
Okay, so my rounds usually I went on that Tuesday morning. Me and my dad we'd be up at like 4 in the morning, and we get there early. You had to be hydrated, like you had to have a certain amount of fluids until you could even start chemo. So I wouldn't start chemo till like 10 o'clock at night, and like that,
Oh, so you
and
were
you
like taking fluids all day long?
yeah, and I had a fluid bag on me in me too, and I'd be drinking liquids no matter what. And I also wouldn't eat a lot because I get sick. So how chemo works is you get each different treatment into the IV bag, and it drips to your IV. So, and then there's also pills like prednisone and all that I took too.
So when they
So,
say chemo, it's something that's coming in through your IV.
yeah,
Not
and
something you're
pills. Yeah.
ingesting, not
No,
something that you're like getting a shot or anything like that.
no, it goes through IV.
Okay.
And there was multiple different things. Like, so one chemo would last like 8 hours drip, and then one would be 15 minutes. It just depends. And
Would
then
you could you tell when things were changing?
yes, because they would come in, and they'd also have to check my vitals like every hour.
Oh,
Just
okay.
because like it's so hard on your body. So and then like it wouldn't work. So I'd have to roll over for them to get my blood pressure. I just didn't sleep very well. But I would be in there till I got done. Maybe I think Saturday afternoon I would get done. I'd go home Saturday night, and I couldn't go home till like my things are done, completely done. And then I go back in that next Tuesday to get the last part of that treatment for 15 minutes. I'd be in the front like with all the other chemo patients, and I'd get that, and then I'd be off like maybe 2 weeks. I think it was every other week or something like that. So like it had time to go home and heal.
Okay. So, wow, I have lots of questions now. So, you're saying you went in on a Tuesday
Yes.
and then you would not leave until a Saturday,
Yeah.
and you were receiving treatment essentially that entire time.
Yeah.
So when you did leave, what was recovery like as far as like when you left, was it just like, oh, now I'm back to being Grace again? Or was it like, I need to lay down and relax because I am not feeling well?
Well, the first time, my first round, I was like really hyping myself up at how good I did, and me and my brother got Chick-fil-A, and I was like yes, and then I went home and I was like I can't breathe, so I went to the ER. I went straight back to the ER, and like I was in the hospital I think for like 3 weeks. It was bad. That was when I lost all my weight. I shaved my head in the hospital. Like there's this thing they call the red devil is what the chemo's called,
Hmm.
and I got these mouth sores in my mouth and down my throat into my chest. So like anytime I take a drink, like I'd be curled over in pain. I just couldn't eat anything. And like my what is it called? My I can't think of it, but it got my sodium levels got really high, so I was only allowed like a cup of water a day.
A cup of
A cup
water?
of water a day. And like let's be honest, if you don't have anything liquid, do you want to eat? No. And
No,
it
you
hurts
just
so
want to drink.
yeah, and like so I didn't eat. I would eat like Jello maybe, and like it was so bad I was on morphine drips. Like I was sitting there pushing that button. I was so out of it. I was just pushing the button every second.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but like it wouldn't drip till it was. I was just so out of it. That was the worst time I ever had. But I learned that you can prevent the mouth sores. But nobody had told me about them. Like I was like, that's a really weird thing I didn't get told about.
So Okay, so the mouth sores were from the dryness of not
No, from the
having liquid.
chemo. Like they literally like it was straight up blisters in my mouth and down my
So,
throat was the side effect from chemo.
oh my goodness.
They call it the red devil. It's I get on the first. That was my first treatment I received that night in the
So
beginning of the
the
week.
first time you receive treatment, you leave hyped up because you're being positive and
Yeah,
you're saying, hey, we made it
I was like, this
through,
wasn't that hard.
we did it, and then
I was
brought
like,
you right back down.
I slept all day. It was a scary. That was probably the scariest moment of my treatment. Was I did not know it was gonna
Oh,
happen.
very okay. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I
Maybe the
did
first
not.
time you had to go through it.
Yeah.
Now was that a reoccurring thing throughout your treatments? Did you called the red devils? What you called it?
But yeah, that was the treatment. But like it was just mouth sores and down my like literal blisters
Was that
down my
was
throat.
that something that carried over with your other treatments as well? Like
Yeah, so I
consistent?
got the same. You get the same chemo every round. Like I would get the
Oh, so it
same
doesn't
treatment every
change.
week.
Okay.
Yes, and like I would get those mouth sores, but I also had like Biotine mouthwash. You know what I'm talking about? I would use that, and like they had Magic mouthwash, which numbs your mouth if you get mouth sores. But I never got them as bad ever again.
So
Thank the Lord.
is it one of those things where they say, when you're talking about side effects, they say, well, this could happen, but it doesn't happen to everybody, or does it like that is for sure going to happen to
That's
you?
actually a really common one. Like
That's
I
a
found
common
out that
one.
was super common,
But
and I
there are
was
some
like,
people it doesn't happen to.
I would think it would happen to everybody. I got mouth sores every single time I went through treatment, but I would just use the Magic mouthwash and numb it to where I could eat. It would just didn't make me want to talk and just made me really tired. But I think everybody gets them. I would say that's a really common one.
Okay. Well, I was trying to be mindful of time. I know you said you had to leave at 3:50, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think this has been a really good conversation so far, and I don't want to. I still have questions that I would like to continue on with this, but maybe we cut it here and we have like this is the first segment, and
Okay.
then we'll go with when we have time to do the next segment because we're trying to work this in with what we're doing in school and things like that. And this was a project she had mentioned she'd be interested in. So, are you cool with resuming this
Yeah.
the next time?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Do you have anything you want to leave anybody who might be watching this on the first video that we make here? Any information as far as to what we've talked about so far?
No. No.
All right. Well, thank you
Okay.
guys for watching, and we will be making another episode as well.